The topic that I'm talking about is crowdsourcing. I am Balaji Bondili, been with Deloitte for a long time. Did what typical consultants do is, go to a client, sit with them, solve a problem, and then go to another client, sit with them, solve a problem. Almost like those scary alien planets that come and devour planets and then walk away, but doing something good. And after a couple of years, after a long time of doing that, wanted to do something different, wanted to see what is the new trends that are happening that can impact our work, and then got into crowdsourcing as a topic. And just wanted to introduce what it is, how it works. And again, if some of you were there on the day before, this will just a couple of slides that might repeat themselves. Crowdsourcing in many ways is using the power of people, individuals that are not employed with your company, either on a contract, either as full-time employment, to drive value to you and deliver stuff to you. And the big difference is the last couple of years, crowdsourcing was all associated with my Starbucks. Let's get some ideas from them. Maybe they're useful, maybe they're not useful, and then we'll have to deal with what happens within the company. Crowdsourcing is now, like a good exponential, has evolved to a lot more broader set of use cases that you can actually start depending on crowdsourcing for ideas and for execution of those ideas. And that's what a true exponential does. And Eric Schmidt was asked the question, what does the next $100 billion company look like? And he had a pretty quick answer. It'll be a combination of crowdsourcing and machine learning. An ability for the crowds to generate data, generate ideas, generate outcomes, and for the machine to crunch it and use it and replicate it back to the users in the format that they require. And he went through a few examples of what that looks like, and we'll look at a few examples as well, just so that you get the context of how crowdsourcing actually works. Just to describe and differentiate employment, freelancing, and crowdsourcing, these are the three questions that you should ask yourself when somebody says we do crowdsourcing. Is it incentive-based, which means it is not effort-based, which means I'm not getting paid for a number of hours that I'm working, but I'm getting paid if I'm competing and winning something, and that is the incentive that I'm participating about. And there are incentives could be monetary, and the incentives could be non-monetary, which is, I need to learn about something new. I want to compete my way to get there. I have a leaderboard that it's a data science leaderboard, and the more I compete, the more ranking that I get, almost like a chess ranking. One of the biggest one is interest-based, which is I have a job, I do whatever I want to do, but I have a lot of other skills that my 9-to-6 job doesn't use. How do I employ that? So I'm choosing to participate in a challenge. I'm choosing to crowdsource. And the way you operate in that environment when you're choosing, making a choice, is very different than what your boss drops on your head, which all of us have at some point in time. And the last one is outcome. It is, again, not effort-based, but you're paying for a very specific, defined outcome. You're not paying for 10 hours. You're paying for, I want an idea, I want a design, I want a predictive model, I want a video. I'm paying for that, versus I'm paying for the effort of the 25 people who might have given me submissions. And we'll show you a few examples as well. Waze, one of those potentially $100 billion company, combination of clearly the crowd and machine learning. So I'm sure, I typically ask this question in other groups that, how many of you have heard of Waze? I'm not going to do that here. It's kind of insulting a little bit. So I'm not asking that question. Pokemon. How many of us have at least, okay, let me ask a question differently. How many of us have downloaded and deleted Pokemon? How many of us have downloaded and not opened it for the last 3 weeks? How many of us played this morning? One of the reasons why Pokemon is so addictive and seems so real is because the base of the maps is crowdsourcing. Niantic, which was owned by Google, they used to have a game called Ingress, where you go shoot pictures of your environment, of things that you like in your neighborhood, and then you upload that, and then now Pokemon converts that into Pokestops, Poke Gyms, other kinds of pokes that I'm not aware of, And that is the reason it feels like it is much more intelligent than it is. It's much more intelligent than a simple Google map, because people took pictures of some little stone carving that somebody left under a bridge. And then Pokemon uses that to convert that into some kind of a stop. So it seems much more real, because on the Ingress game, 15 million points were created, called portals, were created and established, and that became the base for Pokemon Go. Without that crowdsourcing, it'll just look like another Google Map application, which is very boring. And that is the reason Pokemon is one of the success reasons for Pokemon, that it took off, that even if it was a little village of 1,000 people, there was a couple of things that somebody had already marked up. And it could be in India or in Zambia, people had played Ingress and marked things up. So it suddenly made it very, very relevant to them that I'm in a small village, but for some reason Pokemon Go knows that there's something there that typically people are not aware of. Tesla. How many of us want a Tesla? Okay, there you go, thank you. And these are new generation companies, and the reason why Tesla's automatic driving car is getting better is because of the crowd that's driving it every day. It's not as though they've amassed a huge database and they've perfected the algorithm before the car is on the road. The car is getting better every day by the crowd that is using it. And it's thinking about how you manage R&D, manage input into your processes by allowing people to create and make people to generate data, and that makes the algorithm better. You have to really think about, that's the next generation of technologies. That's the next generation of models. Even IBM Watson, IBM, an old stodgy company, when they came up with Watson, they actually put the beta up there, which was so bad that I downloaded it and put in my expense spreadsheet in it to see what might it come out. It was really, really bad. And then basically the fact that I downloaded it and I pushed in my data, it started getting a lot of feedback on how it works. So it's the combination of machine learning and crowd that will drive the next generation of business models. Let's define the crowd as, it's not your employees, it's not your specific team, it's the billion people out there, and it's the ability to harness their resources, their thought, their expertise to get things done. That's typically how you define crowdsourcing. It's not your 100 people or even 100,000 people that define crowdsourcing. And one thing that when we started it, we thought it's mostly used by startups. No large companies use it. It's too risky for them to use, and they already have thousands of FTEs sitting in the bank. Why would they use crowdsourcing? Of course, then they also have consultants like us, ready to help them with whatever they want. Why would you use crowdsourcing? And there are things that crowdsourcing can do right now that employees struggle to do, or consultants struggle to do. And I'll take you through a few of those examples. All of these are companies that have employed, experimented, and in many ways, NASA is a constant user of crowdsourcing. There's always a challenge on NASA to solve something. For example, there's a challenge on NASA about creating the next generation spacesuit, and they want people to do it. They want people to come up with ideas on what it should look like, how the structures and properties of it. The other example is local motors, which is where your 3D printing and maker movement intersect with crowdsourcing. It's the ability to come up with, for the crowds to come up with ideas on what to build, what features do they want in a car for the next generation. And then local motors then uses 3D printing to build those very, very quickly, test it very quickly. So their cycle from idea to a physical prototype is between 3 to 6 months, whereas typically it's about 2 years or more for large companies. And that's the pace with which companies are moving into crowdsourcing. And these are all the quick things that you can actually do right now. These are mature use cases that lots of companies have tried. There are hundreds of vendors out there that can solve these problems. Ideas and concepts from target segments. You can actually get millennials to give you answers on, what do I want my bank to be in the next 10 years? What do I want my wireless carrier to be in the next 10 years? You might do some market research, but users telling you that this is what I want the wireless carrier to be or my toothbrush to be. You get a lot of different perspectives and real ideas that are not market research, and that's something which is a new model. Real-time data. With all of these Uber and Lyft and all of these new companies, one big challenge that large companies have is how do we move at their pace? How do we get real-time data for what's happening in the market at that point in time so that I can have an intervention and then see results? Typically, large companies, their decision cycle time from the time that they see something in the market to the time that they employ something is about between 6 to 9 months. Of course, 3 of those months go to consultants. But it's now, like Uber, just last week, they sent out an email saying, you can pay us $20, and then every Uber X ride for you is $7 for the rest of the month. That's a big pricing decision for them, that they're shooting out to 1 million people. Of course, they had a limit of 1,000 people, and when I tried to sign on 2 hours later, it was no longer an option. It's the ability to quickly react, quickly understand what's happening in the marketplace, put in an intervention, get the data back. Now you have real-time crowd data that can create and generate the data for you, so you can make interventions, get responses very quickly. I'm not going to spend time on the wireframes and mockups because I'll actually show it to you. It's kind of more fun. We do more collaborative scenario analysis. We have a company that we work with called WikiStrat. So it's bringing experts together, and they collaborate together to get to the right answers. It's actually a fascinating process when you have a head of the World Economic Forum debating online with an FDA regulator, because they're all coming towards, it's forcing them to come up to one scenario of what the world could look like, not individual interviews going here and there. So anytime you have any of these needs, you should think about crowdsourcing as a real alternative versus hiring people constantly. Of course, whenever we talk about crowdsourcing, you can never run away from the question of what's going to happen to my IP? How is it protected? Are my legal teams going to agree that this is something that I can do? Actually, in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of progress in the space of IP, legal, and risk and data privacy. And whenever we help companies do crowdsourcing, we always say, don't put your name out there when you're doing design, development, anything related to IP, but always put your name out there when it relates to getting ideas from customers. So there are very specific ways in which each of these have been addressed, but there are still lots of open gaps that crowdsourcing still creates a lot of risks. So it is not a clear playing field. That unfortunately, crowdsourcing has a lot of hype that they'll tell you that they will solve for everything. It just cannot right now. But it is an exponential, which means you have to track to see what are the new use cases, new solutions that are coming up. With crowdsourcing, what can you do? In the end, you can do things differently. You can do things that you couldn't do before, which is, you couldn't, if you had never thought of a Waze type of an application, you would never have access to that data to do anything with it. And of course, you can do more with less. And we'll show you an example of what we did during this conference in a couple of slides. Another big question that I get from clients is, we've done one crowdsourcing project a couple of years back. Didn't really come up with any results. It was really interesting, it was great, but what next? Now, with the maturity of crowdsourcing, you can take crowdsourcing in 2 ways. You can just take prototypes. Anytime you're doing a digital prototype, think about it as I can do all of my digital prototyping with the crowd. You can also do it at a scope, which is I can generate insights with the crowd, I can generate ideas with the crowd, I can generate prototypes with the crowd, and I can also build that prototype with the crowd. So you can do a scope as well. It is not unforeseeable in the future that you will have companies that are with a very thin staff at the top, and everything else is being done in the crowd on an outcome-based manner. So your FTE dependency and again, this is California and Silicon Valley, right? The number of programming languages that are coming out every 3 months, how are you going to hire for that? You hire people, you don't hire skills. They're not completely adept at picking up all these new skills constantly. So it's better to have a variable workforce focused on the outcomes versus staff. So where do we begin? Understand the crowdsourcing use cases based on what outcomes you're looking at, not what jobs you're looking at, but what do you want as outcomes, and understand whether there's a crowdsourcing alternative to that. The second thing is this is still an exponential, and like any exponential, experimentation and iteration is key. You will have projects that will fail, I can tell you that much. And then you will have to let your legal team also know that there will be projects that you fail, but then you are limiting the downside of it significantly with a set of clauses. And experiment with a purpose, which is don't just experiment because I need to do one crowdsourcing project because it just sounds cool. Think about an outcome at scale that if this project is successful, where can I scale it? How many people does this impact? How many assets does this impact? Without that understanding, a lot of companies just do one-off pilots that really don't go anywhere, even if they're successful. If that is successful, it has to mean something. And that's sometimes a lot of companies miss that. So we actually did a live crowdsourcing project at the conference in the last 3 days with maybe a couple of days of prep. And I'll show you what we found. So we asked the question, wouldn't it be better if there's more citizen participation in the government? And this was a topic that we had. And we used 2 different crowds. One crowd to generate ideas called Betterific, another crowd to generate the designs based on those ideas. All of it in the last 3 days. So we got phenomenal ideas from the crowd. One of it was, which a lot of people actually gravitated to, a Pokemon ripoff. Isn't there a better way for people to use the same gamification principles to go say there's a pothole here, and that pothole has a little Pokemon thing. Of course, it shouldn't be ugly like a pothole, but hopefully they'll figure that piece out. And so you're using the people and their interest to collecting Pokemons into something really good for the city. So it's gamifying that same aspect. Of course, whenever you're crowdsourcing, you get good ideas, and you also get weird ideas, which is, there's a gentleman who wanted an app called Start Your Own Coup. We want our own revolution, so it's supposed to be an app that brings people together to overthrow governments. That's the fun of crowdsourcing, is you have people who think in multiple different directions, and also you have to ask the question, what is he trying to say under that? It on the surface looks like a really bad idea, but what is he really trying to say? And then you get some really good insights about what are they trying to do. So we took a set of these ideas and we sent it to Topcoder, one of our most prolific partners, to build out prototypes and designs out of those ideas. And then we got 23 different submissions. Each of them, right now we only put 10 because otherwise it looked too cluttered. But we got 23 distinct submissions for a set of mobile applications within 48 hours. It is impossible to do that to that scale and that variety of input ever when you're within a company. It's almost as if you have 23 different teams working on one idea. It's just not possible. And then we then choose which ones we want. So you could choose, I want just 3 of them, and I want to own the IP of it. The vendor will then transfer the IP to you. You say, I don't want anything. I don't like any of them. They're all really bad submissions. So you don't pay any of them. And that is one of the reasons why crowdsourcing is cool, is because it's outcome-based. Of course, you also have to recognize that if you're being unfair to the community, they will never respond to you. So it's always based on that fairness, that if it is outcome-based, you're being fair and your metrics are very fair to evaluate them. And we'll show you a few of the outcomes. So this is one of them that the community member came up with. So you see the little, just above the start button, that thing is blocking the road, and then you click a button there, and then it says there's something there, and you get a Pokemon type of point. And when multiple people, like you see other people that are also said there's an issue here, it gets escalated to the local government. So he built out the whole process on how do they communicate, and you also built out an Apple Watch prototype as to how this will work in an Apple Watch. So, and every time more people add that issue, it gets escalated, and you get local community points that you can redeem for Starbucks, or it's benefiting everybody in the community. So these are types of ideas that they came up with very, very little guidance. And so the winner, Alex built this out from Venezuela in 2 days using pictures of New York City. So he just did this because, again, we asked them for 6 screens. Alex put together maybe 20 screens. And he came up with new features that we hadn't even asked for, because they choose that this civic engagement concept is what I like, so I want to participate in this because I have ideas. So they're not building to design or to your requirements. They're building based on their interest, and that is the reason you get varied perspectives. So across those 23 submissions, you get maybe 100 different new ideas that you've never had before, because they're not a vendor building your requirements. And that's the biggest reason why crowdsourcing is being very successful. It's the outcome-based nature of it. It's the incentives that motivate them. And of course, at the end, it's the interest that brings them to choosing the topics that they decide. So taking these types of concepts and applying it to large companies is what Deloitte Pixel does, the little unit within the large company of Deloitte. And we work with clients to identify problems and then structure a crowdsourcing program that combines multiple crowds and then comes up with outcomes that are very, very different than typically imaginable. And we also help companies think through, if you have to build out a completely different approach to running a chief marketing officer's office or a CIO's office, how do you do that with crowdsourcing embedded into the capability versus a one-off experiment? Thank you. Questions?
I actually have a mic here. All right, so as we were talking backstage, so it sounds like this is a tremendous resource for the corporation. Helping to understand what are the variety of benefits for the individual, because as we were talking about, I'm going to be talking later about in the future of work, sort of the unbundling of jobs. And so what you've done is you've taken what used to be employees, and you've unbundled, you've broken apart a bunch of different tasks, you've distributed them among the crowd, but in aggregate, no individual is going to make a ton, maybe 1 or 2 individuals will make a ton of money, but the majority of people just don't make anything. And so,
yes.
So what are the benefits for the individual, and how should they be thinking about their contribution to the process and what they get?
Sure. It's interesting. Every crowd, again, because it is interest-based participation, they know that they're competing. They know that they're competing for the winner, so their effort is already structured around a prize. Okay, number one. Number two, for example, we worked with a millennial crowd called MindSumo recently, and they come up with the most elaborate responses to questions. That's because the crowd they might be getting $1,000 as a winner, but they get resume props that we competed among 10,000 students, and I'm the winner. The second is the companies that we work with, we also usually recommend, if you choose a winner that you think is thinking very differently, also bring them on for an internship. So it adds a lot of, and every crowd has different interest reasons to participate, from learning, from competing, from resume props, to real revenue. I mean, the guy, Alex, probably will get a couple of $1,000s for that, for maybe 24 hours of work.
So I get it for, and I don't want to monopolize the question, but to me it's just important to explore
Sure.
the perspective of the individual. I get it for the winner. For the 10,000 others that submitted, there's sort of a food chain sort of process, but there's a whole bunch of people that are participating, and value is no question being accrued by the corporation. But for those individuals, it's not quite as explicit, right? So is there reputation capital? Is it just the learning? Is it the
it's all of them. It's reputation capital, it's learning. So for example, on this project, just on this one, we had 23 submissions. We had about 60 registrants. All of them don't submit, but if you register, you get to see what people are putting up there. So you get to understand, if for the same requirements, how are the best designers thinking about it? How are the newest designers thinking about solving this problem? And how are they showing their outcomes to the client? So it's while it disproportionately does incentivize the winner, they participate because they think they have a chance to win, and there's a lot of learning and reputation that comes with that. It's like running a marathon. Only 3 people still win. But they all want to win and they learn from that process. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's very helpful. I've spent, I don't know, many hundreds of thousands of dollars over the last year and a half developing a website. And we've put it together, and it's basically a way to share technology globally. And for our company, it's sharing a waste to clean energy technology. But we have 10,000 people so far have requested to use the technology. So we created a website called TechPipe to share it. And we're basically giving rights on a county-by-county basis globally. So we're sort of crowdsourcing, finding the right people to use technology in every county, and then holding an auction. So the person who wins becomes a distributor for the technology. Then we're going to make the site available to all kinds of environmentally beneficial technologies.
Makes sense.
So, sorry for all that. But the problem is that I would love to find a way to crowdsource the operation and maintenance of the website, because as this becomes global and enters all kinds of countries, the complexity is going to go off the charts. I already have a basement full of coders and they smell terrible. So what do I do to try to push this out of my organization? You know, I look at my program and say, go crowdsource it, and they all just stare at me going, what do you want me to do?
Yeah. A couple of ways you can think about it. Number one, if all of the data is public and there is no privacy issues about what can an employee see and what can somebody in the crowd see, the problem becomes infinitely easier. But if there's an IP barrier, IP boundary, then it becomes much tougher, number one. Number two, if there are proprietary tools that you use that are not open source, that are not available to the crowd to use equally, then it becomes much harder. So there are a checklist questions that you have to think about how you're structured today that might or might not enable crowdsourcing to take over, updating, maintaining, or even testing, all of it. And we can take you through the list of questions, but it's mostly proprietary stuff that become a bigger issue, that you've built it on a software platform that you have license to that nobody else does. It doesn't work. It becomes very, very difficult. And also thinking about crowds to actually collect the technology as well as to what they see around, and even having them compete on which technology do they think will be more successful in the future. So you can actually look at the entire cycle from the ideas, insights, and the tech, and the maintenance. You can think about elements of the entire chain where you can use crowdsourcing to be a force multiplier.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Go ahead.
How do you monitor, so if you crowdsource,
I think we can hear you.
if you crowdsource, say, an app, how do you then, as the instigator of the crowdsourcing, monetize that? So you talked about IP rights and making sure that as you build it out, you can own the IP of the wireframes and the ideas. How do you then create the sustainability, as Ms. Dyson was talking about?
Yeah, a couple of things, and it's number one, getting the right ideas from the crowd so that you're building something that the crowd wants, that the general population wants, is the first and most important thing. And once you have built something out, using the crowds to do concept testing quickly again, so that you're getting an input from the crowd that you built something right. And even when you have the application in the wild, ensuring that you are running tests or using the crowd to see what are the competitive applications that they're using, what else is working, what else is not working, what are the new features that we need to add. There are startups, and one of them is actually represented here, that is great with features. We have an application right now, how can we make it better by adding features to it? So there is multiple ways in which you can make the application the best one to start with, and then over a period of time, whenever you want to update it, having the crowd give you suggestions on what else do you need to add to keep this more relevant. So there are multiple ways of doing it, and we can talk to you as well. Thank you. I think I'll get shut down.